just this year, they've released their numbers. 37% of the 122 films presented at Sundance this year, so this past festival, were directed by women, which they compare to the previous statistic of 5% female directors, 25% producers, and 14% writers overall.
So I actually also read those statistics because I follow Sundance a lot, and what that says to me is that they are working harder to try to be more inclusive of women, but we're still not even at the 40% mark. And I think they are. I think it's true. I actually made a point this year at Sundance of going to as many female-directed films as I could, including The Rider and Lynn Ramsey's new film. So I actually made a point of seeing women-directed films as well. And I think there definitely are more, and the numbers are growing, but they're still not high enough. And I think that's an issue not just of Sundance, but I think it's across the board, that there's not enough women directors. There's not enough women directors getting high budgets like male directors. There's not enough women directors working at in a variety of locations and for a variety of production companies. So I think, again, things are improving, but they haven't quite met the standards that they should be meeting.
Do you feel like the numbers of women in institutions like Sundance who get funded is representative of the number of women who are making films, or do you feel like that's disproportionate and that there are an equal number of women and men making films?
I don't know those statistics for that, but I would think that my guess, based on what I know about female directors, is there's more female directors working in independent films than in blockbuster films or in high-budget films. So I would think, in terms of Sundance, there's more female directors applying to Sundance than maybe other kinds of institutions, because it's independent and because they allow for low-budget filmmaking and because they've kind of created the statement of diversity where they've already said that they value diversity and that they encourage diversity. They do diverse programming and they make a point of doing that across the board. The other thing I think we have to note here is the difference between the Sundance Film Festival and the Sundance Institute, because the Institute makes a point of including diverse voices. It has scholarships, it has funding available and opportunities available for people of color as well as women and other identities. So I think that the Institute is trying to support that via their services, and I think the film festival is a whole different thing because it has a different purpose, and I think its purpose is to show high quality films, and not necessarily diversity isn't quite at the core of that, I think, to the same extent. So I think A, there's the difference between the Institute and the film festival, but B, I think that as far as I know, there's no section of the film festival that's driven by alternative voices, because it's driven by content instead, so narrative filmmaking, short filmmaking, documentary filmmaking. So it would be interesting to think about what would happen if they did a special section with women directors, or a special section for people of color, or for people of different abilities. So I think, that could be one way of thinking about it, but I think it's certainly part of their mission to be inclusive.
Do you feel like proposals for things like having separate sections for women, having separate sections for diverse voices, would promote more equality, or do you feel like it would create a divide where you have a subclass of people who are creating things that aren't considered equal to the instituted white male directors?
I believe in both. So like Sundance, I don't think it needs to include a women-directed section, but it could. And there are certainly many women-oriented film festivals. So I think we need to value both. I think we need to value festivals that are specifically focused on women, that talk about the ways they value women, that incorporate women and are inclusive of women. And I think we need to promote quality filmmaking and make sure that women are a part of that narrative of the general quality filmmaking or Sundance independent filmmaking narrative as well. So I think actually there's space for both and it's necessary for both. And this is actually something that comes up a lot when people hear I'm teaching the women directors class. They say, why do we need a women directors class? Isn't that excluding all these other categories, right? But I always remind people the reason we need it is because there are so few women that are talked about in general film history classes or intro to film classes the class is made necessary because the lack of women in our history textbooks and cinema kind of classes, general classes.
One final question. Do you feel like movements like Me Too and Time's Up will be able to keep up the momentum that's been going of helping women get access to resources in filmmaking, or do you feel like it will run out and become the thing that people call back to when you point out sexism, that people will say, well, we fixed it?
I think, again, both of those are possibilities, but I'm hopeful. I have a lot of hope in the Me Too and Time's Up movements. A lot of it, to me, is because I believe with celebrities coming out and telling their stories, it enables other people to tell their stories. I believe that by putting money and funding and resources behind these kinds of institutions and what Frances McDormand talked about with inclusion riders and all of those sorts of things, I think, the general public is aware, not just the moving-going public or not just the women, female film directing, interested people public. So many people are aware of this, and I think that the constant publicity and the constant discussion and the way it's entering schools and, nonprofit spaces and the way it's kind of not just about those celebrity experiences, but that it's framing all these other contexts, I think that is why it may move into a space beyond this present moment.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome very much.